I knew something was off the moment Lucas called me into his office with that forced corporate cheerfulness, the kind that usually precedes either a team-building retreat or a layoff. "Ashley," he said, grinning like a politician in election week. "We've got a new intern joining us, just fresh from Columbia. Finance whiz, apparently. You two will be a great team." Right. Like a shark and a seal are a great team. I'd been working in payroll compliance for 7 years. Built the current system from scratch. Not sexy work, but clean. Precise. Bulletproof. And now I was supposed to train the intern? Sure, I've seen this move before. It's not mentoring. It's replacement with a smile. Still, I played along. "Happy to help," I said, matching his fake cheer with something dangerously close to sarcasm. The intern's name was Brian. Bright-eyed, overdressed, and way too confident for someone who still had his school ID in his wallet. He bounced into the room like he thought it was a TED Talk, shook my hand too hard, and said, "Looking forward to learning everything you do." "I bet you are." We started slow. I walked him through vendor routing and automated audits. He nodded like he understood, but typed like a raccoon on Red Bull. Every 5 minutes, another question. Every 10, another suggestion. "Why don't we just switch to a plug-and-play API? Can't we automate the approval flow using AI?" I smiled. Patient. Helpful. Inside, I was screaming. You don't automate nuance. You don't AI integrity. Lucas kept hovering near our desks like a helicopter parent with a severance package in his pocket. "Everything good?" he'd ask, pretending to sip coffee he never drank. "Great," I'd reply, without looking up. He's learning fast. What I didn't say, he's watching faster, because Brian already knew too much. He asked about systems I hadn't shown him yet. Clicked through folders he shouldn't have had access to. And one morning, I caught him flipping through archived bonus memos like he was studying for a pop quiz I never gave. Still, I said nothing. Just logged everything. Quiet. Professional. Careful. And then came the lunch meeting. Lucas insisted I join him and the regional CEO, Mr. Zhang, along with Brian, as a bonding exercise. I should have known. The restaurant was one of those sleek places downtown with soft jazz, tiny plates, and prices that assume you never check your bank account. Polished floors, glass walls, chopsticks preset. I sat across from Lucas, Brian to my right, Mr. Zhang beside him. Lucas ordered fast. Knew the menu. Too eager. Brian nodded along like a ventriloquist's dummy. Then Lucas leaned in toward Mr. Zhang and said something, low and fast in Mandarin. I caught every syllable. "She doesn't know we'll fire her after this. Pity, she looks like she works hard." My chopsticks froze midair. Lucas chuckled, pleased with himself. Mr. Zhang didn't laugh, just nodded politely. Brian gave a confused smile, clearly missing the punchline. And I? I blinked once, set my chopsticks down, reached for my tea. Because what Lucas didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had lived in Hangzhou for 5 years, finished my graduate degree at Zhejiang University, read, wrote, and spoke Mandarin like I was born to it. I had filed pension audits in Chinese more complex than anything Lucas could manage in English. But more importantly, I knew when someone was digging my grave and smiling while they did it. I said nothing. Not then. Just sipped my tea and filed his words away like evidence in a sealed folder. Because that moment wasn't the betrayal. It was the confirmation. The betrayal had started months ago, when Lucas cut my team budget with no explanation, reassigned key accounts to younger employees, and suddenly started CCing Brian on sensitive emails with subject lines like transition planning. They weren't grooming Brian to help me. They were grooming him to replace me. But Lucas made one mistake. He thought language was a wall. He didn't realize it was my weapon. And now? Now I wasn't documenting to save myself. I was documenting to bury him. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about principle. About the silent workers who keep the wheels turning while others take the credit. About the quiet women in meetings whose names never make the slide deck. And most of all, this was about timing. And mine was just getting started. The day after that lunch, something shifted. Not in them, in me. Lucas strolled past my desk like nothing had happened, tapping his coffee cup and saying, "Ashley, can you forward Brian those compliance logs from Q1? He's eager to dive deeper." Deeper, huh? I smiled without showing teeth. Of course, I'll clean them up first. I didn't mean sanitize, I meant set the trap. I opened a new folder on my private drive and labeled it, Stage 1, Watch Them Hang Themselves. Inside it, copies of the logs with specific rows labeled in Mandarin. Nothing too suspicious, just enough to seem like leftover notes from an old audit. Because here's the thing. If Lucas or Brian actually understood what they were reading, they'd know those labels didn't belong to Q1. They belonged to a confidential internal investigation we ran back in 2021. A test file, meaning Brian had no business touching it. I didn't have to bait him, just leave breadcrumbs. Sure enough, an hour later, I saw the file open on the shared server, then again in the system access log. Brian had copied it to his desktop. Perfect. Meanwhile, Lucas sent me a message on Slack, casual tone barely masking the push. Quick heads up, I'm bringing Brian to next week's compliance meeting. Think it's time he gets exposure to real-time oversight. Exposure, that's what they called it now. I typed back, "Great initiative. I'll prep him with context beforehand." Translation? I'll feed him just enough information to get him caught. That week, I started mislabeling low-priority folders, renamed archived training decks with legal-sounding acronyms, changed column headings from vendor contact to VC attestation, normal enough to overlook, strange enough to trip anyone pretending to know what they were doing. And Brian tripped. Hard. In the Thursday meeting, when the head of legal asked about our latest vendor onboarding batch, Brian jumped in confidently. "Well," he said, scanning his tablet, "according to the VC attestation index, all entries meet the FTL thresholds for Q2. The room went still. FTL? That wasn't a threshold. It was a placeholder I made up during testing. Fake term limit. I used it once. In 2019. As a joke." Lucas blinked. The head of legal cocked her head. "What threshold exactly does FTL measure?" Brian stammered. Vendor authorization to, invoice limits?" She smiled politely. "There is no such term in our system." Brian looked at Lucas. Lucas looked at me. I kept a straight face and took a sip of coffee. That should have been the wake-up call. But Lucas wasn't someone who backed off. He was the kind of guy who doubled down, sure he could talk his way out of anything. Or at least blame his way out of it. The next morning, I caught a whiff of desperation. He called me into a side room, that fake concerned expression stretched thin on his face. "Hey, Ashley. Just wanted to check in. You've been a bit quiet lately. Everything good?" I nodded. "Very good. Just focusing." He leaned in like he was about to offer me stock tips. "You know, Brian's rough around the edges, but he's sharp. Give him space to grow, okay? You've got a lot of institutional memory. Just don't make it too hard to follow." Translation: dumb it down for the boy genius so he can steal it faster. I tilted my head. "Of course, I'll make things easier." He smiled, satisfied, and walked out like he'd won something. But I'd already won. Because earlier that morning, I'd added a silent listener to our document approval platform. Every file Brian touched would now forward an auto-notification to a folder shared with our overseas audit team. And remember Mr. Zhang, the regional CEO from lunch? Yeah, I hadn't forgotten him either. He hadn't laughed at Lucas's joke. Hadn't encouraged it. Just nodded. Stoic. Unreadable. But when I'd passed him in the hallway the following Monday, I gave him the smallest bow and said softly in Mandarin, "Thank you for the lunch meeting. I learned a lot. He froze for half a second. Then he smiled. Not wide, not warm, but sharp, knowing. He knew I'd understood everything, and from that moment, I wasn't invisible anymore. That's when the pieces really began to shift. Because while Lucas was busy bragging about succession strategy and private calls, and Brian was giving feedback on processes he barely understood, I was already compiling the file. Every altered doc Brian saved. Every access timestamp Lucas accidentally edited. Every joke made in a language they assumed I couldn't hear. They thought I was being quiet because I was scared. I was quiet because I was building something. Something slow. Something cold. And something irreversible. By the third week, Lucas had stopped pretending. He no longer masked his micromanagement behind mentorship. He skipped pleasantries, stopped asking how I was doing, and started doing what men like him always do when they sense a woman's spine straightening. He got louder, bolder, and careless. "Let's just move faster," he snapped during one morning meeting, waving his hand as if my presentation had personally insulted him. Ashley's methods are thorough, sure, but we don't need gold-plated compliance. We need agility. Brian nodded like a bobblehead. Exactly. We could probably cut out half the approval flow without risk. I blinked. Without risk? Brian opened his mouth to reply, but Lucas cut in. Ashley, we appreciate your legacy processes, but we're modernizing. Brian's been talking to a few tech partners who could streamline the whole thing. I looked at him, then at Brian. Then I said the most dangerous sentence I could muster, calm and clipped. If you'd like to restructure payroll compliance without understanding it, you'll need to speak with legal. Lucas smirked, eyes narrowing. We'll loop them in when we're ready. That was the final clue. They weren't just planning to replace me. They were planning to break what I built, repackage it, and slap their names on the box. And worse, they didn't even understand how much damage that would do. They thought payroll was just numbers. They didn't see the regulatory landmines, the cross-border tax complications, the delicate timing of payments across jurisdictions. You screw it up once, you don't get a memo, you get an audit. But they weren't going to wait for that. They were going to fake stability until the next quarterly review. So I gave them exactly what they wanted. I started sending Brian training decks labeled things like streamlined approval pathways, version 3, and optimized audit exemptions. On the surface, they looked legitimate, clean, sleek. Inside, they were poison. Because every example I gave, every sample file and diagram was built on outdated rules, loopholes we'd patched years ago, test cases that never made it past legal, and just enough real data to look convincing. Brian ate it up like candy. Wow, this is so much cleaner than what I've been reading in the docs, he messaged one afternoon. Why didn't we implement this sooner? Because we didn't want to get sued, Brian. But I didn't say that. I just replied, some things take time. Meanwhile, Lucas kept circling like a vulture, pretending to be a visionary. He started pitching a cost-neutral revamp of payroll to the executive team. Called it Project Phoenix. Sent out a teaser deck at the end of the week with buzzwords like resilient, lean forward, and digitally harmonized. I almost gagged. He even added a testimonial quote on slide 9. The new system eliminates redundancy while improving clarity. Ashley T., Senior, Payroll Compliance Manager. My quote. Except I never said that. He pulled it from an email I wrote 2 years ago about something entirely different. I screenshotted it. Added it to the folder labeled Fabrications. By then, the file had over 130 items. Slack threads, backdated approvals, screenshots of Brian editing permissions he didn't have, emails Lucas sent to third-party contractors requesting sample automation tools that would bypass our existing checks entirely. But the real nail came on a Thursday. Brian sent a file to legal, without me. A reconciliation report for a vendor contract. He copied Lucas. The email read, per Ashley's recent changes to the vendor flow, this should now qualify under auto-approve. only I hadn't changed anything. And I hadn't spoken to Brian that day. I opened the file. He'd manually adjusted the approval threshold, lowered it by 40%. The vendor in question? A known red flag we'd frozen last quarter. I felt my hands tighten around the mouse. Slowly, deliberately, I started pulling metadata. Brian hadn't just sent a bad file. He'd used my template, my formatting, and he'd listed me as the source. Lucas knew. He was setting me up to take the fall for whatever shortcuts they were planning. So I made a decision. I crafted a message in Mandarin. Formal, measured. The kind of language that doesn't just translate, it slices. Mr. Zhang, I've identified several changes being attributed to my office without authorization. I've attached samples for your review. These documents have not gone through proper compliance, and I'm concerned they may be escalated as final. No accusations, no drama. Just a quiet knock on the right door. He responded 12 minutes later. Understood. Please continue documenting. We'll review internally. And that was it. No follow-ups, no requests, just a single green light. But I knew what it meant. Because when silence comes from the top, it's not indifference. It's strategy. By the start of the next week, the office felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just tense. The kind of tense where people start saying good morning a little too quickly. Where Slack pings slow down. Where eyes dart, but no one asks questions. Lucas didn't know yet. But Mr. Zhang had started watching. And I had begun tightening the noose. It started small. I filed a request with IT for an access audit. Just routine, I said. Quarterly check. Nobody questioned it, because I was the one who normally handled those. Within 24 hours, I had a report detailing who accessed which files and when. Brian had been inside the payroll sandbox 3 times in the past week. One of those times? He used an admin override that only 2 people had, me and Lucas, except I'd revoked my own override 6 months ago after the last audit. Lucas didn't know that. So how did Brian get in? Answer. Lucas gave him his credentials. Now, in a healthy company, that alone would trigger a security review. But Lucas ran the department like his own little kingdom. So I did what I always did. I documented. Then I uploaded the report into the growing dossier labeled Phoenix Fraud. I didn't just want to expose them. I wanted everything traceable. Because the truth is, men like Lucas don't fall because they mess up. They fall when everyone sees it at the same time. So I prepared the moment. I organized every false email, altered approval, and fake attribution into a master folder. I cross-referenced each with our compliance policies. Then I translated the entire thing into Mandarin, twice. Once in business formal for Mr. Zhang, once in legal formality for Tokyo HQ. I added a single note in both versions. Please review. Discrepancies between actual policy and implementation may lead to reputational risk if left unaddressed. I didn't sign it emotionally. I didn't ask for help. I just presented truth. Clean, sharp, and weaponized. And I sent it. Not directly to Lucas, not to legal, but to Mayu, Mr. Zhang's personal assistant. The same Mayu who used to sit in our board meetings with a calm smile and a sharper mind than all of us combined. She was quiet, almost invisible, until you realized she was the one whispering in the CEO's ear before every decision. I hadn't seen her in person in over a year, but I still had her contact. She replied the next morning with only 2 words. I see. That was all I needed. The real shift came Thursday afternoon during a team meeting where Lucas introduced new operational efficiencies. He walked in late, of course, holding a smoothie he never drank, wearing that smug expression like he just closed a deal with NASA. We're going to streamline the approval process, he said, nodding toward Brian. We've been testing a prototype flow, thanks to Brian's great work, and we'll begin implementation next quarter. No mention of me. No mention that the prototype was built using fake compliance files and bypassed controls. He clicked through the slides like he was auditioning for a keynote, all graphs and jargon, ending with a bullet point that read, Ashley will transition to an advisory role for knowledge retention. Knowledge retention? Like I was a bookshelf. I sat still, face unreadable. Then Brian jumped in. Also, we've already rolled out most of the changes Ashley outlined in her earlier notes, so it should be a smooth handoff. Except I'd outlined none of that. Lucas looked at me. Ashley, you've been a great support in this transition. We're grateful for your adaptability. Adaptability. A sanitized way of saying, thanks for training your replacement. Now go quietly. I smiled. Happy to contribute. Let me know when you're ready for the formal transition memo. He nodded, clueless. What he didn't know? That memo had already been sent, just not to him. Because 2 hours before that meeting, an email went out from Tokyo HQ, not internally, externally, to our audit partners, to legal, to the board. Subject line, compliance irregularities under review, payroll department attached were 3 files. 1, an access audit with unauthorized admin overrides. 2nd, a reconciliation report showing altered thresholds. 3rd, an attribution map showing my name attached to documents I never touched. Each file translated, timestamped, verified. And underneath it all, a line that read, submitted by Ashley T., Senior Compliance Officer for urgent review. Fluency in Mandarin certified. Cross-reference recommended. The trap was sprung, but I wasn't done, because traps don't just expose, they humiliate. I had one more move. The meeting invite came late Sunday night. Subject, payroll review and organizational realignment, mandatory attendance. No agenda, no details, just a Zoom link and 2 names attached in the sender field. Mr. Zhang, Mayu Tanaka. I didn't reply. I just read it twice and smiled. By Monday morning, the entire department was vibrating with silent dread. Lucas walked in with his usual swagger, but his smile was too tight, his shirt too crisp. I could smell the cologne from across the room. The same one he only used for board meetings or when he knew he was about to be cornered and wanted to mask the sweat. Brian wasn't bouncing anymore either, just sitting hunched over his laptop like he was trying to solve world hunger in Excel. I didn't say a word to either of them. At 10:01 a.m., the call started. Mr. Zhang appeared first. Calm, composed, unreadable. Then Mayu joined, perfect as always. Navy blazer, no background filter, no small talk. Lucas started speaking immediately, voice a touch too loud. Thank you for making the time. Just wanted to align with Tokyo on the changes we've been implementing in payroll, especially under the new Phoenix structure. He smiled, gestured toward Brian on the screen. Brian's done incredible work and we're eager to show our progress. He launched a screen share before anyone asked. Clicked through slides like a magician forcing a card. Diagrams, quotes, bullet points. A chart he'd labeled Ashley T's legacy structure next to one titled Phoenix Flow, Future State. He even added a thank you slide at the end. None of this would have been possible without Ashley's foundational efforts. We're proud of the transition. My jaw didn't move. Mayu leaned forward. Before we proceed, she said softly, I'd like to address a concern. Lucas blinked. Sure, of course. Mayu pulled up her own screen. File, Phoenix Fraud Full Zip. I recognized it immediately. Every file I'd compiled, every screenshot, every translation, every forged memo, every fabricated quote with my name on it. But she didn't explain it. She let the silence do it for her. Click. She opened the access audit. Click. The altered thresholds. Click. The email from Brian with the words, per Ashley's recent changes. She zoomed in on the timestamp, the metadata, the revision log. Lucas cleared his throat. I think there's been a misunderstanding. That document wasn't finalized. Brian must have used a draft. The draft was distributed to legal, Mayu said. and to your third-party vendor as confirmation of compliance. Are you suggesting that was accidental? Lucas stammered. Brian was pale, eyes darting like he was looking for the eject button. Mr. Zhang finally spoke. We were unaware Ashley was being transitioned. She is fluent in Mandarin, correct? Lucas blinked. Yes, I believe she studied in China for 5 years, holds a certification in regulatory Mandarin. Did you know that? Lucas opened his mouth, closed it. Mayu continued, still calm. Several of the documents in your Phoenix proposal use Ashley's name. We've confirmed those attributions are false. She did not draft, approve, or review those files. The translations used were pulled from legacy documents and modified using her archived templates. Lucas looked at Brian. Brian spoke up, voice shaking. Lucas told me to use the format. I thought she approved it. You forged her approval, Mayu said. Then she turned to me. Ashley, do you have anything to add? I looked straight at the camera. Just one thing. I pulled up my own file. Phoenix Deck, original.pptx slide 6. The quote, "The new system eliminates redundancy while improving clarity. Ashley T." I clicked the revision log, showed my email. The actual line? Removing compliance steps for speed is like skipping parachute checks to save time. Might work, until it doesn't. Silence. Lucas deflated in real time, like watching a parade balloon pop in slow motion. Mr. Zhang turned off his camera for a moment, then returned. Effective immediately, Lucas R. is placed on administrative leave. An external audit will follow. Brian's internship is concluded. Ashley. He paused. You will now report directly to Tokyo. Title, Director of Global Payroll Compliance. My inbox dinged. New contract. Signed by Mr. Zhang himself. I nodded once, still not smiling. Because this wasn't a happy ending. It was justice. Lucas tried a final Hail Mary. I was just trying to modernize. Make things leaner. I didn't know she was watching every step. I cut him off. I wasn't watching. I was listening. You just never thought I understood you. And then in Mandarin I said, you thought I didn't understand. I remembered every single word. Mayu nodded slightly, and Mr. Zhang smiled for the first time that morning. Meeting adjourned, he said. Click. Call ended. Lucas sat motionless. Brian looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. I gathered my things. No speech, no strut, just calm. Fluent, quiet power. Because revenge doesn't always scream. Sometimes it speaks in perfect Mandarin.